The ISU-122, the Soviet monster that terrified Nazi tankers. Picture this, a chaotic battlefield, tanks roaring, shells exploding, and the ground shaking. Right in the middle of it all stands the Soviet ISU-122, a self-propelled gun with a barrel so powerful it could stop a German tank dead in its tracks from a mile away. This machine wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of Soviet resilience and engineering genius during World War II. Why did soldiers on the front line swear by it? Let's break it down and take you back to the 1940s, where the stakes were sky high, and the ISU-122 was a force to be reckoned with. World War II wasn't just about soldiers, it was a clash of technology, strategy, and sheer willpower. By 1943, after the massive Battle of Kursk, the Soviets realized they needed something heavier to counter Germany's beefy tanks like the Tiger and Panther. The ISU-122 was their answer, a rolling fortress that could punch through almost anything. Let's explore how this beast was born, how it fought, and why it's still a legend today. Chapter 1. The birth of a beast. How the ISU-122 came to be. The story starts in Chelyabinsk, a gritty industrial city in the Soviet Union, nicknamed Tankograd Tank City. During the war, this place was a powerhouse, churning out tanks and self-propelled guns like nobody's business. By late 1943, the Germans were rolling out tanks with thicker armor, and the Soviets' 85mm guns used on their T-3 for tanks were struggling to keep up. They needed a bigger gun, and fast. Enter the ISU-122, armed with a monstrous 122mm A19S cannon that could fire 55-pound shells, capable of smashing through most German armor. Built at the Kirov factory, the Soviets were pumping out up to 77 of these bad boys every month. These machines were sent to elite heavy self-propelled artillery regiments, often given the prestigious Guards title. Think of them as the Navy SEALs of Soviet artillery, tough, disciplined, and ready to make a difference. The economic engine behind the ISU-122. To understand the ISU-122's impact, let's talk about the Soviet war economy, a machine as relentless as the tanks it produced. In 1943, the Soviet Union was in a tough spot. Much of its western territory was under Nazi control, resources were scarce, and millions were at the front. Yet, the Soviets pulled off a miracle. According to historical data, they produced around 24,000 tanks and self-propelled guns in 1943 alone, outpacing Germany's 17,000. How? Centralized planning, sheer determination, and a workforce that included women, teenagers, and even elderly citizens stepping up in factories. The Kirov factory ran 24/7, despite shortages of steel and constant air raids. Steel came from the Ural Mountains, engines from nearby plants, and every ISU-122 cost about 350,000 rubles, roughly $70,000 in today's dollars, cheaper than a heavy tank like the KV-1. The Soviets saved money by reusing parts from other vehicles, like the IS-2 tank. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Steel quality sometimes suffered, and workers faced brutal conditions. Still, every ISU-122 rolling off the line was a testament to the Soviet people's resolve. For Americans, this might remind you of the U.S.'s own wartime production boom. Think of the arsenal of democracy factories in Detroit and across the country churning out tanks, planes, and ships. The U.S. produced over 49,000 Sherman tanks during the war, a feat that helped overwhelm the Axis. The ISU-122 story is a Soviet version of that hustle, showing how a nation under pressure can achieve the impossible. Chapter 2. The ISU-122 in action, tactics, and firepower. The ISU-122 wasn't just a big gun on tracks, it was a tactical masterpiece. Its job was to support advancing tanks and infantry, staying about 300 yards behind the front line to blast enemy strongpoints. When German tanks like the Tiger or Panther counterattacked, the ISU-122 rolled forward, soaking up hits and dishing out punishment. Its 122mm shells could punch through up to 6 inches of armor at over a mile away, making it a nightmare for German crews. One of the Soviets' favorite tricks was the ambush. Imagine a German tank column rumbling through a field, feeling invincible. Suddenly, a deafening boom echoes from a nearby hill. The lead tank explodes, the next loses a track, and chaos erupts. That's the ISU-122, hidden in a forest or behind a ridge, picking off targets with surgical precision. Its crews were trained to use the terrain like snipers, making every shot count. A heroic stand. The story of Klimenkov lets zoom in on a real-life moment that could be straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. It's January 15, 1945, in East Prussia. Soviet forces are pushing hard, but the Germans aren't giving up. General Rybalko is holding a meeting at a command post on Hill 559.6 when out of nowhere a column of 18 German tanks appears on the horizon. The situation is dire. The headquarters is at risk. Enter Lieutenant Klimenkov, commander of an ISU-122 crew. General Rybalko, cool as ice, orders him to stop the enemy. Klimenkov sprints to his machine, lines up his shot, and boom! The lead German tank is toast. Another shot, another tank down. Then a third, a fourth. The Germans, thinking they're up against an entire battery, panic and retreat. One ISU-122 to stop the whole column. Right there on the battlefield, Rybalko pins the Order of the Patriotic War, First Class, on Klimenkov's chest. Talk about a hero! This story hits home for Americans who've heard tales of gutsy stands like Audie Murphy's one-man defense against German troops or the Battle of the Bulge, where U.S. forces held the line against overwhelming odds. Klimenkov's stand with the ISU-122 is the Soviet equivalent a moment of pure courage and skill. Why was the ISU-122 so deadly? The ISU-122's secret sauce was its combo of power, precision, and crew expertise. Its 122mm gun could penetrate most German tanks, even the fearsome King Tiger, especially late in the war when German steel quality dropped due to resource shortages. The shells had what Soviet reports called great stopping power. Even if they didn't pierce the armor, they could wreck engines, transmissions, or optics, leaving tanks dead in the water. Compared to its cousin, the ISU-152, nicknamed Zveroboy or Beast Slayer for its ability to blow turrets off Tigers, the ISU-122 was a sharpshooter. The ISU-152's massive 152mm shells were devastating, but less accurate due to the shorter barrel. The ISU-122, with its long-barreled cannon, could hit targets with pinpoint accuracy, making it a favorite for taking out tanks at long range. Chapter 3: Urban Warfare and the ISU-122 city fights were a whole different beast, and the ISU-122 proved its worth there too. Its long barrel made it tricky to maneuver in tight streets, but it was a lifesaver for infantry. Picture Berlin in 1945. Rubble everywhere, snipers in windows, and machine guns in every building. Soviet troops move forward, but a fortified house stops them cold. Enter the ISU-122. A couple of high-explosive shells slam into the building's corners, and it collapses, burying the enemy inside. Problem solved. The ISU-122 worked in pairs, covered by tanks and infantry, clearing the way block by block. It wasn't just about destruction, it saved lives by taking out threats that could have cost dozens of soldiers. For Americans, this might bring to mind the urban battles of World War II, like the fight for Manila or the push through German towns, where U.S. tank destroyers like the M10 Wolverine played a similar role. The economic stakes of urban combat city battles weren't just about tactics, they were economic game changers. Cities like Berlin were industrial and logistical hubs. Capturing them meant crippling the enemy's ability to produce weapons or coordinate forces. For the Soviets, taking Berlin in 1945 was a knockout blow to Nazi Germany's economy, already battered by Allied bombing and resource shortages. The Soviet war machine, despite its own economic strains, outproduced Germany by a wide margin. By 1945, the USSR was building twice as many tanks and self-propelled guns as Germany, thanks to factories like the one in Chelyabinsk. This industrial edge, paired with machines like the ISU-122, let the Soviets steamroll through fortified cities and bring the war to an end. Chapter 4: The ISU-122's post-war legacy. The ISU-122 didn't fade away after 1945. Its rock-solid design kept it in service for decades. In the 1950s, when the heavier ISU-152 became the Soviet Army's main self-propelled gun, Many ISU-122s were repurposed as command vehicles or recovery tanks. Some even found a second life on Soviet railways, hauling and repositioning train cars. Rumor has it, a few are still in use by Russian railways today. Reflections. What can we learn from the ISU-122? The ISU-122 story is more than metal and firepower, it's about people. The workers who built it, the crews who fought in it, and the nation that refused to break. For Americans, it's a reminder of the greatest generation spirit. Think of the factory workers in Detroit or the soldiers storming Normandy. The ISU-122 shows what happens when a country unites for a common goal. Today, this lesson hits hard. In a world of tech races, supply chain issues, and global challenges, the ISU-122 reminds us to invest in innovation and resilience. Whether it's building cutting-edge AI or next-gen tanks, the nations that prioritize technology and teamwork come out on top. Chapter 5. Economic Insights and Modern Parallels. How World War II shaped economies. World War II was an economic earthquake. The Soviet Union's ability to churn out tanks like the ISU-122 while under siege was a masterclass in mobilization. But it came at a cost. Millions lived on rations, and rebuilding took decades. Germany, meanwhile, collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. By 1945, shortages of key materials like chromium and molybdenum weakened its tanks, making them easy prey for the ISU-122. For the U.S., the war was a different story. America's industrial might, fueled by factories far from the fighting, turned the tide. The U.S. spent $350 billion on the war, about $5 trillion today, creating jobs and boosting industries that shaped the post-war boom. What this means today. Fast forward to 2025, and the ISU-122's legacy still resonates. Nations are racing to dominate tech fields like AI, semiconductors, and green energy. The U.S. invests billions in defense and innovation. Think DARPA or SpaceX, while facing challenges like supply chain disruptions and competition with China. The ISU-122 teaches us that adaptability and investment in technology are key to staying ahead. Take drones, for example. Just as the ISU-122 changed the game in the 1940s, modern drones are rewriting warfare. The U.S. military's $700 billion budget in 2025 includes hefty spending on unmanned systems, showing how today's battles hinge on tech as much as tanks did back then. The ISU-122 wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol of defiance, ingenuity, and victory. From the fields of Kursk to the streets of Berlin, it saved lives, crushed enemies, millions of views, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let's keep the ISU-122's legend alive. Share this story, drop a comment, and tell us what other war machines or epic tales you want to hear about next.